the Radio Forest Podcast.
Good morning, Forrest. How's it going?
Doing really good. Hey, you're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of your mom passing. How are you feeling heading into next week, man?
Oh, thank you. It's weird. It's just weird. You know, it was extremely weird for me that, you know, sadly when she passes right when we went into full lockdown here in Los Angeles, and with all the uncertainty that was going on, with obviously just the beginning of the pandemic, I couldn't fly back to Scotland for the funeral, which was a tough one to take, you know.
We're talking to Ricky Warwick. He's from Thin Lizzy and Black Star Riders as the lead singer, also from The Almighty. And his solo album, First in 5 Years, When Life Was Hard and Fast, is out now. And on it, you worked with Keith Nelson from Buckcherry fame. You always have such an incredible eye for guitars. Was it tough with Keith? Because I know he has a massive guitar collection. Was it hard and a little overwhelming, or you're like, look, I got my own guitars?
No, it was a blessing. It was a great situation to be in. Keith's such a great guy. You know, certainly for some of the tracks, you know, I wanted to use my own guitars because that's what I'm used to playing and the sound that I have. But to have his vintage guitar arsenal at our disposal was amazing, you know, to be able to use some of those classic guitars, which we did, and we took full advantage of that. And not just guitars, you know, he has the vintage amps and all that kind of stuff as well. And to me, that stuff's the best. You can't recreate that with anything new or plugins. The songs and the playing that's in all those instruments is part of the whole DNA for me. So great situation to be in.
Let's go back a little bit to the earlier part of your life. You're 6 years old. You first hear Whiskey in the Jar, your first Thin Lizzy song, and you talked about it being like almost a religious experience. What was your take then of Metallica's version with you being so close to Thin Lizzy? What was your first impression when you heard their version?
I love the Metallica version, you know, because it sounds like Metallica doing it. And I think that's great. You know, James is such a unique individual vocally and just who he is. And he stamps his personality all over that song, and they rock it up. I think they really did it justice. I think it's great.
Was it hard then being a Glenn's fan in Scotland? Did you feel like an outsider? That's a tough time of your life. You're in a whole new country, but you stayed true to your team, but you had to take some shit for that, for sure.
No, it wasn't too bad, because when I moved to Scotland, you know, I started to go and see another soccer team called Glasgow Rangers, the team that I sort of fell in love with when I was living in Scotland. So, you know, Glentoran would be my first love, and then Glasgow Rangers closely second would be my other soccer team. But, you know, every time I get back to Belfast, I always try and make sure that I can coincide it with taking in as many Glentoran matches as I possibly can.
Now, you've got a lot of guest appearances on this new album. Joe Elliott, one of your best friends, you were the best man at his wedding. You've also got your daughter on there. But the one I'm really curious about, because I don't hear a ton about, and the band doesn't do a lot of interviews, I don't see pictures backstage. Dizzy Reed from Guns N' Roses, who you've worked with before, do you get to sneak backstage? But it seems like they kind of run a tight ship, and they don't do a ton of social media, like meet and greets and stuff. But
Sure.
It seems like you've known Dizzy for a while.
I've known Dizzy for a long time. I've known Dizzy for probably 20 years. I mean, I've been in LA 16, but I met Dizzy even before I moved out here. He's been a good friend. We were lucky enough to do some shows with Guns N' Roses as Thin Lizzy back in 2012 over in the UK. And I can't say enough good things about how we were treated, how they looked after us. You know, nothing was too much trouble. And we got to hang out quite a lot. I mean, Axl was very, very sociable. He would invite us back after the show for a couple of drinks most nights, and it was just a great experience. They do run a tight ship because they're Guns N' Roses. I get that. But I've got nothing but good things to say about our time playing with those guys. It was incredible.
I want to ask you about two specific situations, and you kind of tell me which one were you aware of, like, I'm about to do this thing, kind of a surreal looking at your own life. The one is opening for the Ramones, and the other is playing Motörhead with Dave Grohl. Talk me through what you think right before both of those happened, because they're drastically different, but important to both you and the people you played with.
Oh, very much so. The Ramones was just, you know, I think if somebody pulled the rug out after that tour, I went, that's it. That was your 10 minutes. You've got to play with the Ramones. You're done. I couldn't, you know, I would have gone, okay. You know, because the Ramones were such an important band to me growing up as a kid. And the fact that we got to tour with those guys, you know, for 3 weeks in the UK was just incredible. And, you know, it was right when the Almighty just first started touring as well. So we were kids, we were young. Boom, here we are on tour with the Ramones. Mind blowing. The Dave Grohl thing was at the Ronnie James Dio Cancer Foundation, and I've met Dave a couple of times. So we vaguely knew each other. The great thing about Dave was he just turned up that day, and he's like, hey, you want to get up and play? He's like, okay. We hadn't rehearsed.
Wow.
We didn't do any rehearsal at all. We just got together by the side of the stage and went, okay, we're going to do Bomber from No Sleep Till Hammersmith by Motörhead. Dave's like, got it. I said, we'll do Jailbreak by Lizzy, which Dave, massive Lizzy fan, knew. And what I love about Dave, he's never forgotten that punk rock thing that he had when he was in the band Scream back up in I believe it was Seattle. He's still the get in the van guy. I mean, here's the guy. He turned up. He didn't demand anything. He didn't, it was a shared drum kit because there's so many artists playing that day. He didn't say, I need this, I need that. Or he got up. He didn't move one stand or one drum on that drum kit and got up and played as only Dave does, like his life depended upon it. And that's the mark of the guy. And it was incredible, being on stage with the powerhouse that he is behind that drum kit. It's something else.
Well, Ricky, about a year ago, I was listening to some music. I was listening to a band called I Prevail, and the person with me was like, hey, wait a minute, that's a Taylor Swift song, and I had no idea. It was a song called Blank Space. I didn't know it was a pop song done by a metal band. And on your newest album, you've got tons of covers, Iron Maiden, you've got the Rockabilly and the Johnny Cash, but you also chose Britney Spears. What is it about pop songs that makes them such good rock songs? If I didn't know it was a pop song,
right,
I wasn't judging myself. I was like, this is a good song. Oh, Taylor Swift wrote it. I was like, oh, holy crap, that works. And I think the Britney Spears song totally works for this album.
Thank you. The cover version album you're talking about is the bonus disc that you get with the Digipack CD. It's something I actually recorded about 6-7 years ago as part of a different campaign from a previous album. And it was released as a very limited edition. So this time we decided we'd make the bonus disc and make it readily available. That song, my youngest daughter was very little at the time, and she loved that song, and I learned it on guitar just to really play to her. And I thought, hang on a minute, this is kind of cool. This kind of works, and I think that's you hit the nail on the head. A good song is a good song, and if you can strip it down and play on acoustic guitar and still sounds great, you know that you're on something. I just thought, this is kind of funny. Nobody's going to expect this tattooed Irish guy to cover Britney Spears.
No.
So I thought, okay, I'll have a little bit. Let's have a little bit of fun with this, and let's try and do a take on it. And that's really how it started, But I'm a sucker for a well-crafted, written pop song, which that is. So no shame. I'm absolutely glad I did it.
Last question. Your hometown is pretty famous for a real gnarly race car accident back in the day. Now, did anybody from your family, did they happen to see that live? Because that's right there in your hometown. I think your grandfather's property's kind of right there. And, of course, it's referenced on the cover of this new album. So did anybody in your family see the accident?
Not that I'm aware of. It was so long ago. That race you're talking about ran from 28 to 1936. I remember my father telling me stories about it when he was a little boy. He must have been 5 or 6 when he first started watching the races. And that's where I first learned about it. And, those cars are so primitive, and there's no health and safety back then, as you can imagine. So there was thrills and spills and crashes pretty much every time. The one you're talking about, there's one horrific one, sadly, in 1938, where a car went out of control and plowed into the spectators and sadly killed, I think it was 8 or 9 spectators. And that was the end of it. They stopped it after that because there was no way they could really carry on after that happened. But certainly those guys were risking it every time they got into one of those cars and drove on those Irish country roads around all those crazy bends. Insane.
It's Ricky Warwick again, lead singer, Black Star Riders, Thin Lizzy, formerly from The Almighty. His new solo album is out now, When Life Was Hard and Fast. Ricky, a pleasure to talk to you today, man.
Oh, man, thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. Thank you.